Alright, so let's talk a little bit about plugins again. Now, we've talked about them once before when we talked about installing WordPress and about kind of CMSs in general. And so this is a bit of a revisit of what plugins are, and I'm going to use it to both give you my sort of top 10 or top 15 or top whatever WordPress plugins that I'm using on this site. And I'm also going to use it to talk about some other kinds of little odds and ends. The first of the odds and ends I want to talk about is what a plugin is. A plugin is just another piece of code, and usually what it defines is one or more PHP functions. Now, a PHP function is just kind of a box of things, a program, a box of things you're asking the computer to do. And it can be something very simple, like you could have a PHP function that said, every time you call this function, just give me a random word. Maybe it's a vocabulary builder or something. And so it goes to this list of 10 words and pops out a random word. So, you could have like somewhere in your blog and you do a quick call to the PHP function, and you do that by doing bracket, question mark, the name of the function, and 2 parentheses on the outside. And then you close out the PHP. So you could have that little thing just dropped in for example, your template, and anytime it hits that, you're never actually going to see PHP come through, because what that function will do is produce the text that you've asked it to do. So at a very basic level, that's all a plugin is. It's a set of functions, functions that can be called within your template and other places in WordPress. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. Sometimes you can redefine existing functions. So the entire WordPress program is built of these functions. And so if you know, for example, that there's a function that produces the RSS, the feed that comes out, you can actually replace that existing function with a new one that does it a little bit differently. And you do that through a process of hooks. And this is actually not just WordPress, but it's fairly common across content management systems and just about any kind of program out there that's now extensible, especially in the open source community. And so this provides you a way of kind of plugging your own stuff into the WordPress system. Actually, the way our theme works is similar, and we'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about some of the ones that I have in here. Akismet is now shipped. A lot of the things that start out as plugins eventually become part of the core as WordPress gets older and older. So when it started out, it was a very kind of bare bones blogging system, and over time people created plugins, and some of those plugins became so popular that they just became part of the system. They're no longer plugins. Akismet is probably going to become part of the system. I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. But for now, at least, when the system is shipped, when you install it, it's sitting there, and I think it's actually deactivated, but you can activate it. And Akismet is a blog checking system, and it does very well. That doesn't mean it catches everything. It just means it does very well. Like many, and actually it says, we'll get to that in a second. Like many such systems, it requires that you have a WordPress, an API key. So this is a little password that says that allows this program to use a service somewhere else. So right now, I can't show you my API key. We can go to where it is, but I can't show it to you because it's my private key. But it's kind of like a password that lets me get access to stuff. I would say about half the things on this list require an API key because they're going out and they're getting data or service from a server. In some cases, you have to pay for an API key, but usually, at least for all of them, the ones that I'm using today, they provide the key for free. So why do you need a password if it's going to be free anyway? Well, it gives them a chance to make sure that nobody's abusing the system, lets them track on you a little bit better. So they require it, and they make you get a key. So Akismet is one of those that requires a key, and the reason you're using an outside service is if someone submits spam to another blog, they submit that to Akismet, and it kind of compares across a large number of WordPress blogs to catch people who are using similar spam tactics and kind of outlaw them or check them more closely. So it's a nice kind of neighborhood watch for spam. I'm using the all-in-one SEO pack, and this gives us a chance to talk a little bit about SEO. First, though, we're going to talk about where we find things. You'll see that here we have options configuration panel, donate, support, Amazon wish list. They've put it right here. Many people put it over here. For example, the contact form has settings over here on the left-hand side. Akismet has configuration here under plugins, as does WordPress.com.stats. Some of them are listed under here under settings. They put their things in the settings menu over here, including the all-in-one SEO. Some of them create their own top-level thing, like the gallery does, and the contact does, and database does, and polls do. So one of the things you do when you install this is it kind of hooks in and makes itself, and under tools as well, the admin bar is a plugin. So it can put things on the admin menu. I think it's unfortunate that for WordPress there isn't or if there is, it's not adhered to a best practices. So really these can kind of go all over the place. Sometimes you have to look around and try to figure out where the settings are. The all-in-one SEO pack does some important things, and SEO is search engine optimization. I would guess that the vast majority of people who are paid to do SEO are scam artists. That's not to say all of them are. So there are definitely people who are professionally inclined towards this area and are thoroughly professional and ethical in the way they do things. And they really know kind of the depths of how best to make your content easily searchable, and so they're probably worth every penny you pay them. And then for every one of those, there's two people who say they do SEO and kind of just throw lots of software and other ideas around and kind of miss the boat. So the question, a lot of people I talk to say, "Oh, we need to get an SEO person on this." In some cases, if you have a lot of money and it's an area where you're competing directly against others, then sometimes that makes some sense to bring in a consultant who does SEO. But 90%, I'm going to tell you 90% of what you have to do in order to get good SEO. The primary thing you have to keep in mind is making your site friendly for search engines. And so that means knowing a little bit about how search engines work, and simply making your site usable not just by humans, but by search engines too. So some of the things that are important for search engines are, first of all, that you have valid code. So all of this process we've been going through of validating is actually important for search engine optimization as well. Even though it shows in the browser, if you don't have well-constructed code, then the search engine's parsers may not get it completely, and they may not know which pieces are important. Vitally important is the title of your site. Not what shows up as a heading, mind you, but the title, the piece that shows up here. And by default, most themes just kind of put in your heading, and that may not be the best title for your site. And especially when it comes to inside pages. For example, here's my main page. Let me go to one of these entries. Here's abstract of a non-existent paper. It's really nice when that title can show up in your title, because that's one of the first things most search engines look for. And when you go to Google and you search for something, the title that shows up there is the title, not this, but the title tag from your page. So one of the things that the SEO package lets you do, or the all-in-one pack does, is it lets you kind of shape what those titles are. And again, by default, even without doing any of the settings, it does a fairly good job of this. It also sets the meta tags. I think meta tags are far less important than they used to be, but they're still useful, especially for some search engines. So it lets you kind of do the meta tags and do some of the basics of approaching search engines. This does a lot of what you need to do in order to get good search rankings. There's this other piece, which is you need to get well linked from the right kinds of places, but that's beyond the technical piece. That's more a strategy piece.